You're probably stuck on the same question so many people in Kelowna struggle with. Should you rent or should you buy right now? On paper, it looks simple, but once you start digging into the numbers, the lifestyle, and the reality of this market, the whole thing gets confusing fast. And I want you to hear something right at the start. There is a point in this decision where one wrong assumption can turn into what I call the $450,000 trap. Most people never see it until it's too late, and I don't want that happening to you. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what actually matters. Not what your parents think, not what strangers in the comments section think, not the generic advice you hear over and over again. I'm talking about the truth you need based on what is happening in Kelowna right now. To keep this simple, I've broken everything into 8 parts. We will look at the risks renters don't notice, the real cost of buying here, the forces shaping the Kelowna market, and the one thing that actually decides this for you. Then I'll show you the exact steps to take depending on where you are starting from. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where you stand and what your next move should be. Let's start with part 1, what you might be getting wrong about renting in Kelowna. A lot of people have told you that renting is throwing away money. I know you've heard it 100 times, but here is the truth. Renting in Kelowna is not always a bad move. In fact, depending on your situation, it might be the smartest financial decision you can make right now. If you rent a decent 1-bedroom, your monthly cost is almost always lower than the true cost of owning the same place. And I'm not talking about just the mortgage. I'm talking about strata fees, insurance, taxes, repairs, appliances breaking, and all the surprises ownership brings. Renting can give you breathing room. You know what your monthly payment is. If something breaks down, you're not the one paying for it. And renting buys you something most people overlook, and that's time. You get to learn Kelowna, you get to see which neighborhoods feel right, you get to build savings, you get to watch the market without rushing into a decision that affects your next decade. But here's the part you can't ignore. Renting means you're not in control. Your landlord can sell, they can move back in, you can be asked to leave with very little notice. Rent is high in Kelowna, but recently the rental supply has increased, so there's been a slight cooling, so rents aren't rising as fast as before. So renting is not a waste of money, it's strategic, but it keeps you vulnerable to changes you don't control. And that brings us to part number 2, the real cost of buying in Kelowna. Buying in Kelowna can give you long-term stability, but it can also create serious financial pressure if you're not truly ready. Most people compare rent to a mortgage and think that's the math. That is not the math. The real cost of owning is everything stacked on top of that mortgage. Take a $450,000 condo. Your mortgage might look manageable in your pre-approval, but once you add strata fees, the property taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, and the unexpected costs that always show up, you could be spending hundreds more each month than you expected. And interest rates, even with the cuts that we've had, they're not going back to the ultra low levels from years ago. So don't buy based on rates that you hope to get later. Buy based on what you can comfortably afford today. If your future depends on rates dropping, that is not a plan. That is stress waiting to happen. Just ask anyone who took a variable rate or were told to take a variable rate in 2021. Now here's the upside. When you own, you are building equity. Your housing cost stabilizes while rent keeps climbing. Even if prices stay flat for, say 5 years, you walk away with something a renter never gets. Buying is not a quick win. It is a long-term stability decision. And it only works if the property fits your lifestyle, your finances, and your future plans. And that brings us to part number 3, the Kelowna Factor. Kelowna does not behave like most markets. You need to understand that because it affects your decision. People don't just move here for work, they move here for lifestyle. That creates demand even when wages don't fully support prices. Inventory moves in waves here. When sellers get nervous, listings spike. When buyers freeze, the whole market pauses. And new construction plays a huge role. Projects that were launched years ago are completing now. When hundreds of units hit the market at once, it affects both the resale market and the rental market. This is why rent versus buy in Kelowna is not straightforward. The forces here are different, and they can push the decision in either direction, depending on your timing and your specific situation. Now that brings us to part number 4, the math that actually matters to you. Let me simplify this because most people overcomplicate it. Renting will almost always be cheaper month to month. This is not the question. The question is where you end up in 5 years from now. If you rent for $2,000 a month, that is $24,000 a year with no equity, but no responsibility. If you buy, your cost is higher, but every part of that payment builds value. Even in a flat market, you're better off in the long run because you're paying down your loan instead of paying off someone else's. So you can't choose based on the monthly cost alone. You choose based on what you value. If you want flexibility, renting wins. If you want stability and long-term payoff, buying wins. This decision is not just math, it's your life. And that brings us to part number 5, the lifestyle trade-offs you need to be honest about. Let me say this clearly. Your lifestyle will decide this just as much as the numbers. Owning gives you control. You can paint, renovate, get a dog, settle in, no landlords, no surprise notices, you build roots. Renting gives you freedom. If your job shifts or you want a new neighborhood, you can move. If something breaks, you don't worry about it. Life is more simple. Some people thrive with the structure of ownership, others feel trapped by it. Some people love the flexibility of renting, others hate the lack of control. You need to be honest about who you are, not who you think you should be. And that leads us to part number 6, the future of Kelowna real estate. So here's the truth. You can't time this market or any market. And the people who try usually miss the opportunity they thought they were waiting for. So some people have waited 10 years for the market to crash, and look where they are now. They've built zero equity. Maybe they're still renting. But we do know a few things. Kelowna will keep growing. Population demand will stay high. Construction costs are not dropping. That limits future supply. And as interest rates continue to settle, buyers who have been waiting will re-enter the market. This window we are in right now is temporary. That does not mean rush right in. It just means that don't assume things stay the way they are forever. And the real question is simple. Does buying now make sense for your life and your finances? If not, rent. Renting is not losing, it is a strategy. And that leads to part number 7. What should you do? Here is a straightforward version. If you have little savings, then continue to rent. If your job is unstable, rent. If you're unsure about Kelowna long term, rent. If buying would stretch you too far, then rent. If you have stable income and a proper down payment, buying makes sense. If you want long-term wealth building, buying gives you that path. If you want predictability, renting gives you that peace. There is no one correct answer for everyone. There's only the answer that fits your life right now. And that leads us to part number 8, your next steps. If you decide to rent, do it intentionally. Rent in the neighborhoods you might one day want to buy in. Watch the buildings or the neighborhoods, track the prices. Let this period teach you the market. If you decide to buy, be conservative, get pre-approved early, and don't shop at the very top of your budget. Look at your 5-year horizon, not the next 6 months. Now, when we started this conversation, I told you there's a point where one wrong assumption can turn into a $450,000 trap. After walking through all 8 parts, I hope we can see how easy it is for people to fall into it, and how easy it is to avoid when you have the right information. This was never about pushing you to buy or pushing you to rent. This was about giving you clarity most people never get before making a decision this big. If you're looking for further clarity on your specific situation, send me a text today to the number on the screen. And if you want to understand what Kelowna's market is doing right now, check out this next video right here.